You're listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about leading and living worship. For more information, resources, and to get the book Worshipology, go to kurtisparks.com. Now, let's lean into today's episode.
Well, hey, thanks so much for listening to the Worshipology podcast. This is a conversation all about living and leading worship. It's for worship leaders, worship teams, and worshipers of Jesus. And today's guest, I met Andrew on a mission trip. It was like a bunch of creatives going over to Africa to teach different workshops within the creative world. And it was a trip with Brad and Rebecca. And I got to meet Andrew on that trip and just kind of kept in touch over the years. And now he's doing amazing things. He's a great songwriter, producer, and rocking it out with the band We the Kingdom. Andrew, say what's up to the Worshipology community, bro.
Let's go, man. So glad to be here.
Oh, man, I'm stoked to have you on, man, dude. And, bro, you got to tell us just all of the ways that you got involved in music. I mean, because you're one of those guys that it seems like anything you put your hands to just turns to gold, man. And you're a phenomenal musician and writer and producer. But, man, how did you even get started with music and worship and songwriting?
Yes, in my family, man, it's so ran in my family's DNA. My grandpa played guitar, and I think he was in a quartet. I mean, this was obviously way back before I was born.
Yeah.
He did the barbershop kind of quartet thing, but he also loved to play guitar.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he played guitar and harmonica, and I, vividly remember going over to his place and would just strum on his guitar. And he had his guitar in this crazy tuning. I've actually not seen many other people use it, but it was like a C tuning. So you pressed like one string and it was a C chord. Like, nice. There's like the drop D tuning, but anyway, so I felt like when I first picked up the guitar, I felt kind of like I could play guitar because you only had to play one string.
Nice.
So that was, it's good for the ego of a young kid being like, oh, I can do this. And my dad loved gospel music, and he played organ and piano. And I mean, we grew up in an all-black church, and I just, music is a huge part of culture there. And
that's awesome.
And man, so we'd be there till like 2 p.m. Worship would go long, and then the service would go long. I'd be like, "Hey, I'm ready to eat," as a young kid. But I also, it just kind of really, music just kind of got soaked into me from a young age, and so that's my inspiration. I was just around it a lot, which I think is the most beautiful way to, to get involved in music, is to fall in love with it because of the things going on around you, not because your parents are trying to force you to do music or certain things, but if you see people loving what they do and enjoying music, then it kind of makes you want to do the same. And so, at around 13, I started playing piano. Actually, was first. As far as actually really learning to play, I would, like I said, go to my grandpa's place and pretend like I played guitar. But piano was first where I actually started learning some chords, because my dad showed me a few chords on piano. He played by ear, so I just started kind of picking up by ear. Again, because that's what I saw around me. So that was what was modeled to me, playing by ear. And so I started doing that, and didn't really want to learn to read sheet music. So I also started making up my own songs because, to me, it was way more fun. So at first it was just piano instrumental music, and probably not even very good songs. I mean, I was 13, and then around 15 got serious about guitar and really started diving in and learning guitar. And worship, man, was, for both piano and guitar, it was just the foundation of it all, because that was what I would play. I mean, that was what was around me and being modeled to me. And so, I started playing a bit of worship. And by 15, we were going to a smaller church right down the road from us. And I had some opportunities to lead worship there, as a real young kid, because there's only probably 60 to 70 people at the church. So, it's a good place to grow when you're the best player, even though you're 15 years old. And I was not good, but I had some great people around me that just encouraged me, man. There was this guy that was in college that he, showed me a lot about playing guitar, and this girl that sang there that was in college, she took me to a Shane and Shane concert, and I loved Shane and Shane growing up. And
come on now.
So just some really, really beautiful experiences to slowly get me involved into playing music. And then
Now, how did you start songwriting? Was that kind of just a natural development as you're picking up piano, picking up guitar?
Yeah, at first, it was first just instrumental stuff, and that was piano. I didn't really start writing lyrics until guitar, because guitar is a bit harder to play melodically. You can play chords real easily on guitar. I say real easily.
Yeah.
With a bit of work, you can play chords on guitar, but it leaves a bit of space in your brain to sing melodies. So when I started playing guitar, it's when I started adding lyrics and melodies. And again, I just fell in love with it. And I don't know exactly where that came from, because no one around me was writing songs at that time. So I think that was just the Lord kind of breathing over me something. And so I started writing, and I would write at least a song a day when I started, maybe sometimes 2 songs a day.
Wow.
And it was, again, these were super simple songs. Like the first one is so cheesy. It was it's like a kid's bop song. Like, what have you learned from the Bible today? Have you learned how to walk? Have you learned how to pray? What have you learned?
Dude, I can't believe you remember that. That's amazing.
I do, man, because it was like, I was so excited that I had written a song, and I was showing my parents, and they were, proud of me and encouraging me. And so that was really...
Dude, you got to revive that idea, man. Make it a song today.
Maybe so. Maybe that actually could be next We the Kingdom record.
Let's do it.
Yeah, no, but it's kind of, that was what got me into writing. And like I said, none of the songs really that I wrote for the first few years would be much good at all. I would never show them. You got a little sneak peek here, but I would never show them to people generally. But it was the growing. That was the learning and the growing process. And I think when you're young, you don't have as many conditions in your mind or voices in your head telling you, like, maybe it's shame. Man, that's probably a huge part when you're younger. There's a lot less shame in your mind. And so I was just excited to be doing it. And as I got older, those voices did get louder. And actually, it's wild, because writing songs became harder as I got older.
Really?
Yeah. That's...
Now, how did you go from Kansas City to Nashville? What brought you to Music City, man?
Yeah, I'd been starting a few bands in Kansas City, and loved playing music live. But I'd always wanted to be around musicians that were just a way higher caliber than I was. And Kansas City has some great musicians, but in my circles, I really didn't have many people around me that played a whole lot of music. Just a few friends, and they were great. But I wanted people that were way better than me and just pushing me to grow. And so, probably when I was 15, 16, 17, started thinking about, I wonder if Nashville would be a place that I could go. And I had some friends go off to Belmont. And so I started praying about that really, really heavily. I was like, Lord, I really think this is somewhere I want to go and grow. And I actually came and visited Belmont. And when I was probably 17 or 18, I visited Belmont and Trevecca here in Nashville. And just, it was an amazing experience, but felt it in my spirit so strongly. The Lord say, no, it's not time. This is not my plan for you right now. And I fought him on it for a while, man. I was like, kind of do that thing where you question, like, is this really God speaking? Or maybe it's just my head. Maybe I can do it. And each time I try to make some progress, I just felt in my spirit it was not right. I did not have peace about it. So I was like, all right, Lord, I trust you. And man, trusting the Lord was the best thing I've ever done, because when he opened up the door, I was, I'm much further along. I'd gone through community college in Kansas City. I was probably 23 at the time. But when he opened up the door, he just opened door after door after door. And I got an internship. So when I first moved here, a buddy of mine, I was talking to him on the phone. He lived here, and he was like, hey man, there's this guy named Ed Cash who I'm working for right now. He needs people to intern and help him out at the studio. And I felt in my spirit like, okay, that's the door. That's what you've been waiting for. And so I did the interview, got it. I literally had 3 weeks of school left at this community college to finish an audio engineering degree. But the Lord said go. And so I was like, I'm not waiting. You said go now. So I'm going right now. So I didn't even.
Now is the time.
Yeah, man. And it's wild because that sounds a little bit unwise. But again, when the Lord says go, you go. And and it, like I said, kind of opened door after door. So at that point, I was, I'd moved to Nashville, was in an apartment with another buddy who just randomly, he's I don't know if you know what the Enneagram is, or if people listening will know what the Enneagram is, but
of course.
He's a 7 on the Enneagram, so he loves just fun adventure. And so when I said I was moving to Nashville, he's like, dude, I'm gonna come with you and we'll be roommates. And so I was like, great. Again, it was like this crazy story of like, just got a roommate immediately, and it was much easier to kind of transition into Nashville, because it's, there's a lot of things that could keep people from moving here. One is finding a roommate, knowing where you're living, affording it. And so it was cool to see all those doors just open. So moved here, started interning, and then soon after that, I guess I started I had been doing my own production in Kansas City as well. And so again, I think the Lord was kind of preparing my skills and my heart to jump into that, because when I moved to Nashville, I really knew what I was doing as far as music production was going. And so I, anybody I met that was writing songs, I was like, hey, come write a song with me. I'll produce it for you for free, and we'll just, make a demo and see where it goes. And so it was really cool to see, people latch onto that. And I started getting a ton of co-writes. Even while I was interning, during the middle of the internship, I was delivering a hard drive to a mix engineer here in Nashville named Ainsley Grosser, who is
I love Ainsley, man.
One of the top guys, man. He is unbelievable. And I walked into his place to hand him the hard drive. I was just doing the internship stuff and started talking, and he's like, hey man, do you want to mix assist me? I got a budget to pay you if you want to be my mix assistant, and I'll let you do that. And
the magic words right there.
I was like, yes, done. You get paid and you get to work on music. And so
that's awesome.
It was incredible. I got to see some amazing records being mixed. I worked on for King & Country's Run Wild, Live Free, Love Strong record.
So good.
And got to know the family a bit. So they have the Smallbone family. Joel and Luke are two of the kids, but they have I think it's 5 other siblings, 7 kids in the family.
Wow.
And just got to know the family a little bit. Got connected with them. Started writing with one of their siblings named Libby. And I'm actually doing this podcast from the Smallbone farm here in Franklin, Tennessee. So I have now 2 studio buildings on this farm. They got like 40 acres out here. And again, just the Lord, man, opening doors, because opportunities fell in my lap that I definitely did not deserve at the time and had to grow into. But just got to write with Libby and mention that I was looking for a place, and their family's amazing, and they have some buildings out here, so they let me renovate some buildings, put studios in here, and actually live in the basement of the house here. So I've been here for years now. So that's kind of the fast track story of it all, as far as that side of it goes.
Man, that's so cool. So it sounds like you kind of moved to Nashville, had this internship in place, and then it's just kind of like building relationships. Being part of it's like being in the right place, the right time, but the other part is just kind of one small step at a time.
Yes.
Being obedient where you're at, and then God just blessing that. And now here you are. I mean, obviously, still producing, still writing, but a part of We the Kingdom. And I think there's so many people that just really resonate with the sound of We the Kingdom. I remember the first time I heard Holy Water, I was like, dude, this is dope. And just really dig in some of the records that you guys have released.
Man,
you just got back on tour. You told me you just got back from on tour like at 1:30 last night. Like,
yes.
So, dude, I'm just pumped that you're awake enough to do this podcast with me today, man. But bro, tell me, so how did that unfold? Like, how did you get involved in We the Kingdom, and what was it like, in the beginning, kind of being the only, you're like the only non-cash family member that was in the band, right?
Yep.
What was that like, dude?
Oh man, it's kind of wild. Man, how did that start? So like I said, so I was interning with Ed. So Ed, for people who might not know, is songwriter, producer, one of the legends in Nashville in Christian music.
Yeah.
Just from, one of his earliest songs, How Great Is Our God. And obviously up through working on a lot of the Bethel records and just so many songs throughout the years. So I was, really grateful to be around him and his brother Scott and learning from them in the early years and at their studio. And they needed to renovate one of the studio rooms. It was right before the Chris Tomlin record, Love Ran Red. They were about to track that, and they wanted to, finish out some of actually, it was just in a house. The studio was just a house that turned out to be a studio. So no one lived there, but it had a bunch of rooms. So I had a background. My dad, for his full-time job, did mostly construction work when I was growing up. And so I worked with him a lot, and just another guy hired me to do renovations on houses. So I knew what I was doing, as far as building and renovating. And so I was like, hey guys, if you're renovating, I'm happy to help. I find it fun to create, beautiful spaces and make them into something. So a lot of their studio, I helped renovate and build, and started building sound panels. And so I was just spending a lot of time around them. And around that time, Scott asked me, who's Ed's brother, he asked me to lead worship with him at a Young Life camp. And so that's a huge part of their family story. They were very heavily involved in Young Life. And I also, in Kansas City, was involved in Young Life for a bit. Yeah. So I started leading worship at Young Life camps, and also started going to this small church here in Nashville. And it was really beautiful at first, but it was, their family was going, and a few other families, and it ended up being really toxic. I'll come back to that in a minute. But so I just got to know them, and we were leading worship together there. So it was, me and Scott, Ed, Ed's younger son Martin, and then Ed's daughter Franny were leading worship there. It was on Saturday nights. So on Saturday nights we'd just sit, and it was a small church, kind of what I was used to for my later years of growing up in Kansas City, which I love. I love small community, man, because you really get to know each other well. And in a lot of ways, the church and the community of the church was the best I'd seen, and especially moving to Nashville, needing close community when I didn't know many people. It was a really beautiful place. Another buddy of mine also went there. And so, it was really welcoming. And there was a little bit of a check in my spirit. And that's one time I didn't listen to the Lord. Or maybe I was trying to figure out if, what that was about. But I was like, man, the community here is better, more beautiful than most churches I've seen. So I don't know what this is. Maybe this is just, I've never experienced something like this. So I'm feeling convicted about some of my sin in my own life, and that's, unfortunately, if you're in unhealthy church situations, might be the way that the enemy tries to lock you in under, whether it's an abusive relationship or any kind of relationship. You're like, you start questioning yourself. And that is a hard line, because there is conviction that's from the Spirit, but there also is, this kind of like self-shame or I don't know. I have to dig into that part of my story a bit more, but. No,
you're right. I mean, there's definitely a difference between, like, I would say, like, conviction comes from the Holy Spirit. Condemnation comes from anything outside of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like trying to decipher and discern between condemnation and conviction.
Yes.
And it sounds like that was kind of where you were at, wrestling between that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so in the midst of that, I mean, I probably went. I was a bit guarded, but going there for a year, and the community was great. But the lead pastor, there were some things he would say that'd be like, I don't know if that's quite what I believe, but I'll let it slide again because the community's great. And about a year to a year and a half in, some stuff started to come to the surface to light about what was going on behind the scenes. And at that point, I was really thankful because, I met with the Cash family, especially mainly Ed and Scott, and was like, hey, what's going on in your hearts? What's happening here? And they were like, yeah, I think this is from the Lord. I think there's some things off here. This is probably not a healthy place to be. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna like take that in consideration, but I'm also gonna go and spend a couple of weeks just in the Word, in prayer, and hear from the Lord myself on this, because I can't take someone's word on it, because then you're always looking back and thinking like, oh, did I make the decision because it was right, or because someone else convinced me it was right? Yeah. And I think that's really healthy in whatever relationships or situations you're in. You got to hear from the Lord on it. So I did. I spent a couple weeks praying about it, and the Lord strongly told me, like, no doubt in my spirit, yes, this is something you're supposed to leave. This is not where you're supposed to be. And
Wow.
it was kind of nuts because you'll hear us talk about it a bit as a band, so it's out there. But the rest of it's Ed's story and the family story. But they were kind of swept into this, crazy media storm where people were talking about it, and it's really unfortunate to see some of media take hold of it and try to twist it to make it sensationalized and tear people down.
Yeah.
And listen, I think the pastor was definitely manipulative and an unhealthy person. But other people were dragged into it that probably should not have been. And so it was a chaotic season, man, for all of us going to the church. And, it was kind of in the midst of trying to figure out what community and church looked like. And I was pretty hurt by leadership, especially. I still believed in the church.
Yeah.
I still believed in the work that the Lord was doing in people's lives, but I didn't really want to have anything to do with defined leadership roles in church. And so for several years, my community was my church, but I didn't go to a church building. I kind of leaned heavily into friendships and was, part of it was being bitter and being hurt and letting the Lord heal me of all that stuff. But in the midst of that, we were at a Young Life camp, and I think it was probably the end. So it would have been right after that mission trip. It had been August of 2017. We were at this camp, and it was me and the Cash family. And we were just kind of processing, what had just happened.
Yeah.
And started talking about it. It was one night we were down by the pool. There's like a in-ground hot tub. We were, sitting there with our feet in the hot tub, kind of just talking about what was going on, and even talking about the kids at the camp, because God was doing something special at the camp, and these kids were just on fire for Jesus. And so getting to see that was really healing and really beautiful for all of us. And and so we wrote a song called Dancing on the Waves, and that was the first song that we all wrote together. And it felt like God just kind of laid that in our laps, man. It was probably 30 minutes. The whole song was written. The most fun, easy song I've ever been a part of. And we were just kind of like jumping around, being fun and crazy. Like Scott was swinging a beach towel around, like hitting the ground as we sang it, just like, it was so fun, man. We were just having a blast. Like when you're a part of, something that is beautiful and creative and refreshing, it's just like so life-giving, man. So life-giving. So that night we played it at the Young Life club that they had. And the kids loved it, and we were just singing at the top of the lungs. We're like, what is this? This is, something we just wrote. And these kids are singing it, as if they've known it forever. And so over the next couple weeks, we just wrote more and more songs. And it was like just this natural progression. I had no idea what was to come, but the Lord was doing something in our hearts and through us. And so no intention of taking these songs anywhere, but to share them with these students that were going to the camps that we were leading worship at. And it was, just a really beautiful, beautiful season.
What I love about that in your story is that, like, you didn't allow going through a season of toxicity to just completely, like, disintegrate your faith, right? But you knew that God had something better for you on the other side of that.
Yes.
And as you just kind of leaned into the people that God put in your life, man, like, here you are at a Young Life camp, and this is kind of the birth of We the Kingdom, right? I mean, like, you guys just having fun. And what did that do for your spirit? Just kind of like as you walk through maybe one of the hardest seasons, and then you're kind of starting to see God begin to bring life and joy back again to just your worship life, man. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, I literally, as you were asking that, I literally got the picture of, when you like maybe fall asleep on your arm or something, or your leg, and it goes to sleep, and you wake up, and you're like, oh man, I can hardly feel what's going on in my limbs. And then, as you kind of freak out at first, and you're swinging your arm around trying to get the blood flow back, and then it starts to tingle a little bit, and you're like, oh, okay, it's still there. There's still life there. It kind of felt like that, like, oh, there's life. There's still life in this. Like,
wow.
Yeah, it's because the Lord, I believe, is good in all those seasons, but sometimes it's okay if you don't feel like he's good. You can still believe he's good, but it's okay not to feel like it. That's something that I took to the Lord a lot. I was like, God,
wow,
I still think you're good, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it right now. I don't know what you're doing.
Wow.
And so it's like your arm, you still believe it's there. You're still trying to get the blood flow back into it, but you don't just cut the arm off. Because it is something that was used. And I think that's maybe what happens. I've had friends, a close friend of mine, man, left the church and never came back. And it's kind of like he cut his arm. Something happened and hurt him, and he cut his arm off, never to come back to it. And he's like, I'm done with that. And it's really, it's really hard to see that happen. But I'm thankful that the Lord and my friends, I think community is probably, I cannot overemphasize community, because those are the people, if you have good community, that will keep you grounded and connected to the Lord and to good things and help you heal. And so, in that season, it was really beautiful. Felt life, all of us, I think, felt kind of life flowing back into our veins. And people started encouraging us to start a band. We're like, that is not on our plans, not at all. I mean, I had gotten really happy just doing production work. I've been, at that point, been helping Ed do some production. I got to work on the Bethel record, Victory. It was either, I think it might have been right after that, actually, that the Victory record happened, but I don't remember what records working on. I guess the Tomlin record was a bit before that. And so I was doing some production with Ed, doing production on my own. Got to work with a producer here named Ted T. Who?
Oh man, come on, dude!
He is
Mute Math. Let's go.
Yes, man. I got to work on. I guess Zed at one point was looking at doing a remix of Chaos. And so Ted asked me to go find the original files, and so I looked through hundreds of hard drives and finally found the original files for Mute Math Chaos, and I was just freaking out.
Bro, that's so cool.
Do you know that whole song is literally 16 tracks? Wow! And it sounds like a massive, massive song, and half of those are drums. A couple of those are vocals and background vocals, but all of those, like, what makes it feel so full is just all of these synth sounds that are, it's basically done on just a couple synths, but they're just so well produced, so well played. So that was kind of,
dude, that record was like a life-changing album. That first Mute Math album, I saw him 3 times off that record tour, and man, so good, dude. That's amazing. Well, that kind of leads me to, I wanted to ask you too, as somebody who's you've written a bunch, you've produced a bunch in different contexts and for churches as well as bands and artists, and how does somebody who does it all the time, how do you keep creativity fresh? How do you not get stale? What's kind of like that inspiration? What is kind of like your rhythm of inspiration and finding inspiration to keep creativity so fresh in your life, man?
That is sometimes the most challenging thing to do, and there's seasons for it. But I mean, something that I did not appreciate enough for a while was boredom. How letting yourself have space really, really helps your creativity. And I'm really thankful. I grew up. My family had a black and white TV till I was late in high school. My family did not watch TV much, and when we did, it was and you know how you can turn your phone to grayscale? So it's something different. When it's black and white, and the real world still feels better than watching TV. You can get some information, have some entertainment, but the real world still feels more fun and exciting. And I really appreciate that. I'm honestly I don't know if I'll do this, but when I ever have kids, I might go back to black and white TV for a while. Just there is something about just creating space. My parents didn't let me play video games too much. I played a bit, but it was at first it was a half an hour a week of video games. That was it. That's all I got.
Dude.
And so
I think it worked for you, man.
It did. Yeah. I was able to, I had a big imagination as a kid, and still do to this day. But I think it's really, really important at younger years to let your imagination develop and grow. And so I think that got me through a lot of years when I was first, starting to create. There was a lot of space for it, and it felt like the most exciting thing in my life. And as technology has taken over my life a bit more, creativity honestly has gotten harder. And so there's times I'll go back and I'll put my phone on grayscale mode. I'll take social media off of it.
Wow.
I'll just create space so that the fake world or the distracting world feels less exciting than the real world, and it lets you stay present, man. It's so important. So yeah, I would say that's hugely important for creativity, for me at least. is all
Now,
that.
is it kind of like what's the discipline side of like songwriting, and is it like a daily rhythm for you still? I remember in earlier in the podcast you were talking about, writing a song a day, sometimes 2 songs a day. What does that rhythm look like for you now, as maybe your schedule has a little bit more demands on it?
Yeah, I'm kind of gotten to a changing point in my career where I think it was vitally important. And for anyone out there who's, creative, I think it's so important to have a long season of life where you just create and create and create, and don't let anything stop you. Don't question it. Don't put boundaries on it, and don't I think it's so important to finish a song. So don't be too hard on yourself. And as a kid, I was thankfully a little bit oblivious to. Ed actually said this phrase, which I really have appreciated. But once you taste the fine wine of creativity, of writing, it's really, really hard to go back. So once you've tasted excellence, it's really hard to go back. And so there is this dichotomy in this, or this rub in it, where if I had probably been around too good of songwriters when I was starting out, I probably would have not become a songwriter, because I've been like, man, that's what excellent songwriting looks like, and I can't do that right now. So
they would ruin it for you.
It would have ruined it. So and there's a lot of people who ask me, how do I get in these writing rooms with all these big songwriters? I'm like, don't right now. Don't let. Yeah. There's a verse in the Bible that says your gifts will bring you into the presence of kings. I think that's in Proverbs somewhere. But I remember when I read that, I was like, yes, it's about developing your gifts. It's not about how do I get into the presence of great people and then develop my gift. Wow. It's how do I develop my gift, and the Lord uses those to bring you where He wants to. And so, I think that's largely important. But as far as creativity now goes, it's much further in between. So I'll go, and I have gone, unfortunately, months where I haven't written a song. I try to, every month at least have a few co-writes, and the band, we'll go through seasons, but we co-write a lot. We'll have seasons where we, co-write every week several times. And so that having people around me to help me remember to do that is good, because I'm producing records on the road. The band's producing records together, so we're all doing that. And so I'm thankful that my gift has developed enough to be in a place where it's still there, and I have to be careful not to lose it, because I do believe if you don't use something for a while. What is the phrase? If you don't use it, you lose it.
Don't use it, you lose it, right?
And so there is.
I mean, it's definitely not like there's the other side of it too, where it's like, it's like riding a bicycle, and I can personally attest, after getting on a bicycle in my late 30s. I hadn't ridden it in like 10 years. Dude, I crashed. Epic crash. Hurt my hands, skinned up my whole leg. And I'm like, no, it's not like riding a bike, because I tried that and I crashed, man.
It's not, man. It's not. Yeah, that's.
Oh my gosh.
That thing doesn't really apply. I mean, you can go for small seasons of time, but it's like that with everything in life. You gotta keep up the craft. So, I'll try to write as often as I can, but a lot of times it's once a week. But I do have a notepad, and voice memos are my best friend, man. If I'm going along and something pops in my head, I'll just hit record my voice memo. I'll save that voice memo to a note, and then write out, whatever lyrics I hear, and keep those ideas.
Now, what's the process like? Like, I mean, obviously, like, you're on tour with the band. You guys probably come up with ideas together as you're, whether you're in a bus or you're going on rehearsal and something kind of strikes. But like, what is that creative process like in the context of a band like We the Kingdom?
Yeah,
what does that look like, Andrew?
It's much different, and I highly value making music in community. There's two
That's cool.
There's two avenues for me. One is making music that I love for myself, and then the other is making music with community, and they look vastly different, and they both are very important. So as a band, man, a lot of times songs will start when we're just kind of creating space. We're hanging out. Maybe we're at a sound check, and we've sound checked what we needed, or sometimes we haven't quite sound checked, but someone has this thought and starts playing it, and then we all jump on board of that, and so we start. So there's so many songs that have started in soundcheck. We have a song called "Child of Love" that was on our first full-length record, and that one started at a soundcheck. We were just kind of messing around, and I don't remember even who started. I think Martin was playing this beat, and anyway, so we started it, and we're just mumbling stuff into the microphones, and voice memoed it. Came back to it. It was probably a year later. that we came back to that one.
Wow.
But we'll voice memo stuff all the time. There's times that, someone will start a track, like we'll just have this musical inspiration that someone on their own will have started, and we'll bring it to the group and play it. And, just there's so many avenues that creativity can hit. So it's just like open to the wind of creativity. And whenever you feel it blowing, just following that. And that's one of our kind of mottos, I guess, as a band is, if we feel the wind of inspiration blowing, we drop what we're doing and we'll chase it, because that's something special. It's a gift from the Lord when that's happening. He's doing something. So follow the Spirit. But yeah, I mean,
man, that's so cool.
Sometimes it's I'm trying to think, like Holy Water we were in the studio working on another song called God So Loved, and Martin started playing these chords on the piano, just like we all were over at the desk, the control desk, working on a different song. And he started playing these chords, and we're like, oh, those are cool chords. And then we just stopped, went over to the piano, and within, again, it's probably 30 minutes to an hour, we felt the wind of creativity and just wrote that song, man, and produced it in the next day. And sometimes it's a little bit unhealthy, because we'll drop things that are on our laps. So like our label was like, hey, waiting for God So Loved to be finished. Like what's going on? We're like, we started a new song. Sorry.
That's awesome, man. Well, I think there's something like that is intertwined with discipline to like chase down the idea, like when it comes. And I think too often, like songwriters are like, man, like, let me just kind of put that idea off to the side, and then they don't find that same like spirit that was in the room that struck when they were literally getting that idea. And I think it's cool that you guys, you just mentioned a couple songs that obviously like so many people know now, and it had to do with you guys chasing down that inspiration that the Spirit brought in the moment, man.
Fear can so often keep us, fear of messing up the flow or what's going on can so often keep us from great ideas. And I've felt that a lot, like in a co-write, like you can tell something's not going anywhere, and you can tell it's probably supposed to change, but you're like, I don't want to mess up, whatever people are thinking. I don't want to mess this flow up. Or what if it doesn't come through? What if I try to start this new idea and it falls flat on its face and I look like an idiot? It's like, man, if you feel the Lord moving, if you feel something in your spirit, don't let fear hold you back.
Yeah, I think that's a word for somebody listening who's maybe dabbling in songwriting, and fear is always creeping at the door, man. And you just gotta blaze through it. I love that. I got to ask you this. So this is a podcast, we got worship teams, worship leaders listening. Some of y'all's songs have obviously had that crossover from, being kind of more of a rock band and playing in venues to like finding their ways in church. Like, I mean, I know churches that are doing God So Loved and Holy Water. What are some of those songs that you've kind of like have that natural flow from being in a rock venue to being led in a church? And do you guys kind of approach it with that intent of like, man, this could be worship?
Yeah, it's so wild to see what the Lord's done in our music. Because at first, like I said, we were leading worship for kids at a Young Life camp. So we start as a worship band. And I mean, a little piece of the story is We the Kingdom, as a band that one of the bands I tried to start in high school was named We the Kingdom. So I was praying like, okay, Lord.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of nuts. I was going through changing of season, graduating high school, and trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. And the Lord clearly spoke to me, gave me the name We the Kingdom, and kind of this vision for making music in community for the church and with people in church. And so I got pumped about it. I got the social media, got the website, got things set up and ready to go, and then tried to start the band, and it fell flat on its face. And I mean, it's so hard to, find places to play music and to make a living at it, for sure. And I got really disappointed, man. I mean, it's probably early 20s, maybe 19. And I was like, okay, Lord, I think I heard you wrong. Like, I'm just going to put this to the side. And I don't think this is ever going to happen. And so that was the point that I got out of, playing music and got behind the scenes and doing production. But it's wild to see the Lord kind of bring it full circle, because once we started writing these songs, we were leading worship, and I felt the Lord clearly say, like, this is what We the Kingdom is for. Like, this is, I've been saving this for this time. And so, man, I truly felt for the first time the deep faithfulness of God. And it's one thing to talk about, yeah, God's faithful, and I have the food that I need every day. Well, that's great, and I'm so appreciative. But it's so easy to take that for granted, right? Because it's something we've had our whole lives.
Yeah.
But when you experience a season of disappointment, then to see God bring something back around and say, no, wait, I am faithful. This was something I'm doing in you. It just took time. It's just my timing and my way. And so we started, when we had the conversation, like, are we going to start a band? And we were sitting around this fire at Ed's studio, right behind his studio. And I was like, guys, if we want to start a band, I have a name. And immediately everybody was like, yes, like, that's amazing. Let's use that name. And I,
So dope.
It brought me to tears. I just started crying and like felt the Lord say, like, I'm faithful. This is what this was for. And so coming back around and starting to write music, we all were kind of like under the impression that we would be a worship band. So when we started writing, we started trying to write more worship kind of songs, and the Lord just kept kind of moving the needle a little bit. Like, they weren't really worship songs. So the first batch of songs we wrote, God So Loved was the most worship, but we're trying to make every song a worship song, and it just wasn't. And so we're like, okay, like, we're not going to argue with, what's naturally the natural energy, what the Lord's doing. And so when we wrote Holy Water, it is actually, we were excited about it, but we we're also questioning it. And we're like, is this what we're supposed to release? Because this doesn't feel like worship music. And we know the song feels inspired, but so we were all a little bit confused and talking, with people that we trusted in our label about it. But it was really, really cool to see that after we released that song, to have so many churches message us and say, like, or send us videos of them leading at church. And we're like, oh, so it kind of is a worship song. Like, we had no idea.
Yeah.
We had no idea that people would still play it in church. And so I still to this day, I don't know what to call us, because our hearts are definitely for the church, and we love leading worship. And there's, like you said, there's songs like God So Loved that will intentionally definitely make space to write worship songs. But I would say 90% of the time, we just say, there's no boundaries. We're going to write and create whatever the Lord has us write and create. And if it's worship, great. And if it's not, and if it's not even radio, if people, if we're the only people that love this is still what the Lord's giving us. So how do we stay true to the purity of that?
Well, I love what you guys are doing, man. And I mean, one of my personal favorites is Jesus Does. I just love the lyric behind that. And I think you guys are definitely striking a chord with so many different people. I love the style, the production, and everything behind We the Kingdom. So, man, just want to continue to encourage you in that, man,
bro.
and keep chasing down what God's got for you, man. Well, dude, listen, Andrew, I got one last question. This is something I close every podcast with. I just love to hear what the Lord is speaking in the moment to people. And so, dude, what's the Holy Spirit been speaking to you, man?
I love that.
As you've traveled and you've just seen God do so many incredible things firsthand, dude, I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
Man, what's the Holy Spirit been speaking to you lately?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One that I cannot get away from would be testimony, the power of testimony. And
wow.
The hard thing about testimony is it takes trials to get there. It takes trials to get testimony, and trials are not fun, man. Trials really, really suck in the moment.
Wow.
You hear the stories about people that, and Ed has a story and shares it almost at every show we do, where he was, on drugs at one point and really struggled with alcohol. And there's this weighty story. And sometimes especially as a teenager, kid growing up, even now, or before the last few years, I was like, Lord, I want a stronger testimony. I feel like my life has been like fairly easy. And then over the last few years, man, I went through some really, really, really hard things. And I was like, never mind, Lord, never mind. Maybe
I'm good.
Maybe I don't want that. Man, I've just gone through with the church, and actually with a dating relationship, went through some forms of abuse. And it's really weird to say and to talk about, because you're like, that'll never be me. That'll never be something I walk through and let myself go through. And man, so I've had a couple of hard years where the things that got me through those years was hearing the testimony of other people and how the Lord brought them through it, and saying, like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to get through this right now in my life, but I know that, Lord, you brought them through it. So I believe that you can do it for me. And
Wow.
I keep coming back to the verse in Revelation that says, we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And so it's putting those two in order, like blood of the Lamb first, like absolutely need Jesus, his sacrifice first. Like that's what saves us. And then after that, as we walk this life and go through struggles, it's testimony that helps us through our worst moments in life. And so, yeah, I'm starting to be encouraged to slowly share as I, heal from that, slowly share my testimony. And I want to encourage anyone listening, like, don't be afraid to share your testimony. And it's uncomfortable because it's never fun to say. I'm sure for Ed, like, as he shares at shows, when he first started sharing his testimony, no one wants to say like, oh man, I was addicted to drugs. Like the devil tries to put shame in that and keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Do not let shame keep your mouth shut, man.
Wow. That is so good, bro. Oh man, thanks for your time on Worshipology, man. God bless you, dude.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks. To learn more and find resources for your team, you can visit kurtisparks.com and grab the book at worshipologybook.com.